and our friends are going to come, and that's about it. Fast forward 2 years, we have a community of almost 2,000, very lovely, wonderful Discord. We've got some professional sponsorships, about 60 people come and watch us play D&D every week. It's super awesome. We have just the funnest time. I love it so much. We are a mix of DMs and veteran players, about over half. Half of our table are DMs in some way, shape, or form. And I would say that we're a narratively focused table, meaning that the crunch and the mechanics of D&D are kind of not in the foreground for us. Everything is justified through story, and that's what we're going to talk to y'all about today. As individuals, my name is Em. I am the creative director for Blackwater D&D. I also play, and I am also a therapist who is trained in using RPGs as a therapy tool. So I have my master's in counseling from here at UBC, and I've been trained through Game to Grow out of the States. Therapeutic DMing is one of the funnest things that I get to do, and it also allows me a really cool lens about how to look at how tables work. So yeah, I'll probably talk a bit about that today, particularly one of my favorite topics, bleed. But these wonderful people should introduce themselves too.
Hi there, my name's Sean Deppner. I'm an actor and I'm a fucking nerd.
Yeah, my name's Adam. I don't have my master's in anything, and I like D&D. That's my credentials.
But this is who we really are.
Yeah, this is who we really are. I just want to take a second to shout out our amazing artist, Tiana Kovacevic, at miss._Marston on Instagram. I keep bugging her to join Twitter, but she won't do it. This is our party. I love these characters so much. It's nuts. On the left here we have Letters, who's a Minotaur war wizard and paladin. That's Sean's character. Callie, she's our paladin, played by Lennon. Finnan in the middle, played by Adam.
You can tell by the eyebrows.
Absolutely. Kale, our human sorcerer, played by Yanis here in the front. And then that's me on the right, Nepentha, our tiefling cleric. I think one of the cool... Sorry. No, it's okay. You got excited. Go back a bit. Go back one. So the cool thing about getting to live in a character for this long is that you really get a chance to bite into the story of D&D. And at the end of the day, we as humans love stories. We grew up hearing our parents tell us stories as children. We fell in love with Disney movies and grow up to just love stories of every time. That piece of fantasy escapism is something that connects us through as human beings. You can sit down and tell someone a story, be that about your life, something that you've heard, and that resonates with you. It's one of the reasons that TTRPGs are so fantastic, is that they bond us together through collaborative storytelling. It's a truly magical experience, and we as humans have been doing that since the dawn of time, sitting around campfires doing so. So I have fallen in love with these characters and their story, and I hope that you come hang out with us and listen to us tell our story. But enough about these wonderful people, let's dig in. So TTRPGs have blown up recently. Within the last probably 5 years, we see the kind of like amazing explosion of shows like Critical Role, Dimension 20, and the one in the middle, a personal favorite of mine, High Rollers. So all of these shows have something in common. They all kick ass. Like, they're amazing. You watch these people sit around a table and you immediately are transported right into the center of their story. You care about these characters almost as much as the players themselves do. There are fandoms that pop up. Artists submit art all over the place, and you'll find a character that you're like, ooh, that piece of their story resonates with me. It hits somewhere, and you often hold on to that moment. Their highs are your highs, their lows are your lows.
I will say for these specific fandoms, I care for Gorgug and Scan and Shorthalt more than I care for most people in my life, so...
Yes.
Yeah, you know.
So these tables are all amazing, but how did they get that way? And whose job is that to make sure that they are amazing? Of course, there are the pressures of them being on camera, and also the fact that a lot of them are professional performers. But if we put all of that aside, there is something that ties these shows together, and that is that all of these shows are narratively focused. The story is front and center. Combat happens, but it's not the main thing that occurs. We're not seeing a combat every episode. We're not sitting there watching the players do number crunching. Most of these characters are not like min-maxed and power gamed, though I have so much respect for people who do that. Like, much respect to anybody who does that. I'm not that kind of person. So let's talk about how we can help your tables be amazing. I would say that we at Blackwater are a very narrative focused table.
That's fair.
Yeah, fair? Yeah, okay. Cool. Next slide, please.
Oh, do you want a thing? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
He plays a wizard. He's
Barbarian real life wizard at the table.
So these tables are amazing because of things you won't find in the player's handbook. You could read the player's handbook and it will not necessarily create the conditions for you to have the most amazing TTRPG table. But hopefully today there's some tips and tricks that you can take forward that we have adopted in our games through a lot of careful introspection, critical self-feedback, and collective feedback with each other, as well as open communication about our table that have helped us develop into what I think is a pretty awesome narratively focused game. So we're going to talk today about how to bring narrative focus into your game. I'm going to do that. Sean's going to talk to us a bit about how to... Oh, fuck. Go back to. Thank you. About how to use group dynamics and group work to promote optimal conditions for narrative development. Sean's going to talk about that. And Adam is going to talk about how to carry narrative threads through combat.
you do it. I'm scared. You've already fucked up. It's happened. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So this workshop here will be primarily focused at players, as well as some things that you folks as DMs can do. But we do have another workshop this evening at 5:15 right here, which is a DM's workshop. So our DM for the campaign, Tim, as well as Adam and Sean are going to be here. It's an hour and like 45-minute long conversation. We encourage everyone, come sit in the top 2 rows, come sharing your experience.
Bring some questions.
Bring some questions, bring some stories, and we would love to talk to you about DMing. Okay, now you can flip the slide.
Just the one though.
Just the one. I'm going to move back over this way so that I can see my nose.
Come join us. Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I'm sorry, I can't see. Okay. So when you're wanting to bring narrative focus into your games, we first have to consider about why people enjoy TTRPGs. First thing is that people who play TTRPGs get a sense of empowerment from it. There are things that you can do in a TTRPG that you cannot do in real life. Like, every week, I mostly have to save somebody at the table from dying.
What? No.
Every fucking week, I have to save some idiot from dying.
Listen, if there's a hole, we're gonna jump in it.
I know, or a lava stream, you're gonna jump
in
through
the hole.
Also, you gotta teleport places blindly, because that's how you have fun.
Absolutely. So what is really cool about RPGs is that you can overcome a lot of difficulties or situations that you haven't been through in your life. You can play that out in front of you and your brain thinks you're doing it.
Yeah.
And you get the same feedback, the same releases of oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. Your brain is like, holy crap, I just did that cool thing. And it doesn't know that you're just telling a story about it. The other thing that you get to do is build relationships. And you might be like, well, yeah, of course, I play D&D with my friends, but you get to learn about these people in completely different ways. I have learned things about my friends that I sit at the table with. Tim and I are I have learned things about Tim that I didn't know as just his partner. So it's very cool, and it is also an aspect of play. You get to play with people, and in the current world that we have right now, how often do we as adults get to play anymore? It is very, very rare that you can sit down, shut your brain off from all of the crap that's going on in the world, and actually play and enjoy and have fun.
I feel like
go ahead, Adam.
before we get, because Sean and I have dropped the word a few times, we're sweary types, especially me, I'm Australian. So just, that's your forewarning. If anyone is offended by the fuck word.
Apologies.
Uh-oh.
And in the end, it is all about escapism. So when you play a TTRPG, you get to step out of yourself for a while. I get to stop being M for 4 hours a week. And I recognize my privilege. My life isn't exceedingly hard, but still, it is quite nice to be able to go and be Nepentha for 4 hours. And that is one of the reasons I fell in love with TTRPGs, and it's the reason I keep playing. And the more and more that I continue playing, the more and more depth and nuance I get to understand about my character, which in turn means there's more and more depth that I get to understand about myself. Neppy, my cleric, she grew up in a temple away from the rest of the world, sheltered away. And I think that that's an homage to my lonely kid upbringing. I'm an only child. I didn't have a lot of kids to play with, so I got to work through a lot of my lonely kid stuff through Neppy, which was really cool, and I didn't realize it until I had worked through it, and then was like, wow, I'm really grateful for that, because that sucked.
That's what I find is when you hit that thing where you're playing and you're like, oh, that's a piece of me that just, oops, you don't know it until you know it, and once you know it, you've played through it, and you can kind of have that a little bit of that catharsis around it, and it's very satisfying.
But Adam, how do we get to that catharsis?
That's an amazing question.
So we're going to talk about a couple tools today that you can employ not necessarily simply, but you can start adopting at your tables. The first of which is promoting vulnerability at the table through safety tools. So I would first and foremost recommend reading up on what safety tools are. Kiana Shaw, if you look up Kiana Shaw's RPG safety tools, I would recommend all of them. They are amazing things to bring into your table right from the outset, whether that's at a session 0 or whether you're planning a campaign as well. If you don't have those at your table, they're also very easily things to be like, hey, can we meet as a table outside and talk about these things to make sure that everyone feels comfortable to play? Because the important thing about play is you cannot play unless you're safe. Children are very much the same way. Little kids will not play unless they feel safe to do so. It's the same for adults as well. So this includes things like checking in, whether that's before session, making sure everybody is doing okay, checking in at breaks, and giving even a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways at the end of the show or at the end of the session. Very, very easy. Setting boundaries, talking about what are no-goes for your campaign. What are topics that you just don't want to include at all? And this would be done something through the concept of lines and veils. So you can ask people, what are your hard lines? What are things you do not want to see in this campaign? I know there's things that I as a DM would just never include in my campaign because I know that they just don't need to be there. I don't need to play that story out at this table. But there might also be things that you could be okay with at the table, but they can be veiled. Like at our table, one thing, we acknowledge the existence of sex at our table, but we fade to black is often how we say that happens. This stuff happens, and then you fade to black.
Nothing gratuitous.
Nothing gratuitous.
Real
no.
classy.
Lots of flirting. Tim flirts with us all mercilessly. It's great.
Sup, dude.
Another thing you can do as well is allow your character and yourself to grow and to feel things. If you play a completely flat character that does not feel any emotion, that character's not going to grow because there's going to be no push for that character to do so. It is the same as people. If we don't allow ourselves to feel things, I see this all the time as a therapist. If you don't let those feelings in, or you push them in, or you push them down, no change is going to happen. And that is what we love about storytelling, is change. We love to see characters grow, whether that's for better or for worse. Growth is really, really important. Something that can be really unsatisfying for a lot of people in the TTRPG setting is when characters start acting in what we would call parallel. They play beside each other but never interact. And this often happens when players or DMs have an idea about what should be happening or how this party should be acting. I would say let go of those shoulds, or you'll should yourself to death. Okay, so that would probably be one of the most important things that I would recommend. There's also a concept that we're going to talk about on the next. Yeah.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah. Adam's going to come over and grab your question. No, it's okay. Questions are great.
He's really good at shouting, so he's got your back.
He's got a loud Australian voice. Yeah, okay. I would say
The question was, what are some of those like preconceived shoulds that we should avoid? Is that more or less?
That we should be aware of.
Be aware of.
Some of the shoulds that I would say you should probably be aware of are character tropes. Don't think that you need to play an archetypical character to fit in to a D&D party. Play a character, and we'll talk about this in a sec. Oh no, my battery is running low. That's bad. Play a character that allows you to feel things, not necessarily that is interesting. Be aware of feeling like your party should do something at some time. The story is always going to be there for you, so don't feel like you need to push forward in any way, shape, or form. Those are probably the two big ones that I can think of. That's a great question. Thank you. We're going to also talk about bleed. Bleed will be something on the next slide if my computer makes it to that point. It's a concept discussed by Sarah Lynn Bowman, who's a PhD, and Emily Care-Boss, who's a game designer. We'll talk about that in a sec. And then I would also recommend blending story and mechanics when you create your character. Don't necessarily flesh out the entire concept of your character's story before you roll your stats. Let your stats also inform your character too. Have it be a bi-directional relationship. Sean actually put forth, we were talking about this ahead of time, a really good example of Molly Mock from Critical Role's Campaign 2. Fantastic character, so aesthetically pleasing, very cool, very charming, but the charisma stats did not support that at all. So it left the player, Taliesin, wanting. It left him trying to go into all of these roles where he was trying to be, the face of the party, and he couldn't do that. So have both your stats and your narrative inform your story, and don't necessarily be too tied to one. You also want to try and make a character that connects on an emotional level. You don't need to necessarily make an interesting character, because if they're entirely intellectually interesting, you and the rest of your party won't be able to connect with them on emotional level. Try and have some story beats in mind for your character that tug at heartstrings, yours particularly, because this is your character. And there will be ways that you will find to connect emotionally with the other people at the table if you let yourself. And I think that is all I have here. And I'm going to pass it over to, no, actually, I lied.
Talk about bleed.
I'm going to talk about bleed.
Bleed is so cool.
Okay,
Bleed is
before
so cool.
Before my slides die.
Bleed is good.
This is bleed. There are academic papers published about this, please go read them. Sarah Lynn Bowman is one of the most fantastic voices in the TTRPG academic scene. So this is the concept that defines your experience of emotion when you are playing your character. It's the fictional experiences that we experience as TTRPG players are felt, as I said, by you emotionally, and your brain cannot tell the difference. And bleed occurs when the boundary between yourself and your character is blurred. So emotions that your character feels seep into your own consciousness. Or say you're having a bad day, when you go to play your character, that could bleed into the way that you play your character as well. So being aware of bleed and using it to your advantage can really, really help elevate your experience as a role player. Allow yourself to feel the things that your character is feeling. I can think of a time where, so my character, she was essentially backed into a corner and forced to make a deal with the Raven Queen. She didn't want to do it, but she didn't think that there was any other way to help protect the party. So she took the deal. It was her alone, and she took the deal. Which resulted in the rest of the party getting branded on their back as in an oath of fealty to the Raven Queen. And that hurt the rest of the party very much. They were so angry with her. And I knew that there were feelings of frustration and anger from my fellow players.
Yeah.
Not just me.
Finnan wasn't mad at Nepentha, Adam was mad at Em for a while.
And I clocked that. And I clocked that at the table, and I felt bad. Neppy was wrecked. Neppy was absolutely wrecked, but myself as Emma, I took about 3 weeks to process that decision that I made in game, because it affected my relationship with every one of the characters at the table. And I was nervous to come into this next session and what would happen. But I allowed myself to be open to that feeling and allowed myself to sit with it and work through it, and also remembering that amongst my friends at the table, I am safe. They're not going to stop being my friends because I made a decision in character, even though it frustrated them and made them upset. As well, oh God, okay, here we go. I did it to myself. We also think about the line that separates the self and the character as something called the alibi. This is that quintessential, well, it's what my character would do. Now, a lot of people use that in a pretty crappy context to justify doing awful things under the guise of their character. But I would encourage you to use that as a way to help protect yourself if the emotions that you're experiencing as your character are too much for you as the person. Remember that you are not your character in entirety. You are so much more than this character, but they do hold a part of you. So let them take up a little bit of space, process your emotions, and then revisit it when you can. Bleed is best managed with safety tools that are co-created between the DMs and the players at the table. Okay, sweet. So that is me. I'm gonna stop talking now, and I'm gonna pass it over to Sean.
Whoa. Are we all standing? I'm gonna sit.
You can stand, Okay, so there's a lot that we can say about group dynamics, but we have a limited amount of time, so I'm just gonna stick to one thing. I am guessing that if you're here, you are people who care about making your games better and probably don't have issues with personal engagement with your characters, right? You're a bunch of nerds, among nerds wanting to be better nerds. That's so cool. A lot of the narrative disengagement happens when groups aren't connecting. And there's a lot of ways we can help with that, but the best way, if I can just give you one thing, is if you want to feel the group more engaged, you have to engage more with the group. And so what that means is, if there is a character that your character is not connected with, hello? No? If there is a character I am an actor. This is the training.
I told you not to unplug it.
And we're back. If there is a character that you're having a hard time connecting with, and if you're like me, you'll be frustrated because they're not playing the right way. You have the shoulds that, that player should be taking notes, that player should, etc., etc., etc. a good way to channel that frustration is to be genuinely curious about that character. If you're feeling like, well, there's a lot happening here, but if there's something happening where I'm just not finding the connection in the play, then during a long rest or something, be like, hey, Mr. Druid, who set the town barber on fire.
Oops.
Like, what's your deal with nature, man? Like, because when we talk about bleed, if you have a moment of genuine connection with another person, even if it's my tiefling rogue talking to your warforged druid, that moment of connection of two people in the players actually builds rapport. And so, and of course, oh, just closer to my mouth? Oh, like this? Oh, okay. Thank you. And so, there's kind of two types of players that'll come out of this. There's one, which is, I imagine most of you, which, oh, I've got a 6-page backstory, and I've just been waiting for someone to ask me about it. Well, I was a robot, and I was built out of trees, and suddenly you've got this rapport going, and you're connecting as people. And then suddenly, as you have a deeper understanding, the next time things are happening that aren't going quite the way you feel they should, you're able to be more empathetic and see where it's coming from. Or they're the type of player who might under-prepare, and you are then doing something way cooler. You are giving them an opportunity to create their character. Because I don't know about you, but I've played with a lot of people who come in half-baked. They're playing, they've just brought Gimli. They've brought a dwarven fighter who likes to drink and has a penchant for women with beards. Cool. But when you actually ask him about that, then suddenly that player is like, oh, I don't know. And they, as soon as they say, well, why do I do the things that I do? What is my relationship to my dwarvenness? If you just ask that question, there's no right answer. They'll just feel what's right, and they'll make it up live. And the best part is, they're making it up in front of everyone else, because even if it's just our two characters talking, there's 6 people in the room, and we just get to watch this person develop. And so
I'll speak to like prepped backstories and less prepped backstories, which I prescribe to, is like, if you want to do your 6-page backstory, that's awesome, power to you. But it's also really fun to discover backstory at the table. If you're like, these are the starting motivations so that this character makes sense in this group, so that they're not just like, I don't want to be here. You can start with those, and then as you go, like we said, during a long rest, you're like, oh, well, this is the reason why I'm motivated to do this thing, because this, and that, and you get to discover it with your friends, and it's very satisfying.
100%. Like, come in prepared, but leave blank spaces on the map for dragons to live. And so an example of this is when Neppy does this unreal deal with the Raven Queen. Everyone's mad at Neppy. Sean Deppner is mad at M. I'm coming to the party being like, oh, fuck it, I'm gonna leave it. And that's not useful. You know, that's not the D&D I want to play, so I stop. And when we finally finished the boss battle and, you know, we're able to just breathe for a second, I was just like, hey, man, could you tell me why you did that? Because character and Sean are having a hard time understanding. And of course, that's really just what M wanted, because M knows why Neppy did what she did. And so that just leads to this, I did that because it felt right at the moment, and then suddenly, genuine vulnerability, we've created that safe space, and now our characters have a stronger rapport than
much
ever.
Stronger bond. I think that moment for Letters and Neppy really dug deeper into their relationship, and they started understanding each other to the point that Neppy, as the cleric, at some point in the campaign, though he didn't take her up on it, offered Letters a paladinship under her god. So it led to the characters having a much stronger connection and deeper understanding for each other.
And so,
sorry to interrupt, but I want to say that I know we're here to talk about D&D and rolling dice, but this is also just good advice for life. If you're mad at someone, talk to them. Like, as a real, like, that's my biggest problem with TV, where I'm like,
Well,
just talk. You'll solve all your problems.
If you want to talk about bleed, this is a different conversation. Talking to people when you're mad and when they're mad is really scary, and D&D is actually a wonderful, safe place
To practice.
where that alibi,
Yeah.
it's the same skills, but with lower stakes. But
And
D&D
you-
is really good for you if you play it right.
And you also, if you do that, this is my therapist, capital T therapist talking, if you practice talking to people at your table in situations of conflict, you get better at it in real life, which is so great. You get this like wonderful, safe avenue to practice doing things. Just amazing. Go ahead.
And so I do want to pass it over to the joys of combat, but this, if you want to feel engaged with others, is how much longer? I don't know. 15 minutes. We have 30 more minutes? Sweet, I'm gonna luxuriate. It's like, it's really simple things. I've got to go to the blacksmith, I need a cool new sword. That is something that my character could just go, and then that's like a fine, fun for me shopping episode. But what makes it a character growth episode, if I say, hey, Mr. Rogue, who loves their daggers,
Yeah.
you clearly have a good taste in weaponry. Do you want to come along and like, can I use your expertise? And what that does is that shows that other player, I've noticed this thing about your character that is really important to you, that you talk about a lot, and I value it. And when people feel valued and heard and seen, that builds that rapport. And then suddenly what would have just been a shopping episode, do I want the +1 great axe or the sword that does fire damage? Suddenly I'm now talking to the rogue about our relationship to weapons and like how you as a rogue versus me as a paladin, our different relationships, and it's become a character growth moment.
And an extension from that is a topic that we talk about at our table. I should almost have our presentation back up here. Yeah. Very detective. Woo! Good.
I love electricity.
Love it. So the concept that we often encourage each other to do is called throwing the ball and catching the ball. So when you are working in a group, it's very difficult. Social interaction is really hard. So what we encourage you to do in a role play setting is to be ready to take the like metaphorical ball of the spotlight and throw it to someone else or share it with them. And additionally, be ready to catch it when it comes to you, because it can be really hard if you as a person are trying to involve other people at the table and they shut you down. So say yes to when those people ask you, hey, do you want to come to the blacksmith with me? And also try and invite people to go to the blacksmith with you.
Yeah, like, I'm sure you've all noticed that generally at your tables there's louder voices and quieter voices, and just offering a hand to the quieter voices, if you are like me, a louder voice. I know we're talking about, oh, do we do the Dwarven Tunnel or through the Paths of Edoras? Like, what are we doing here? You know, if someone turns to Pippin and says, Pippin, what do you think? Which they didn't do in the movie.
They should have.
They should have.
Pippin would have known what to do.
Then if that player is a little more quiet, then they're like, maybe they are genuinely indifferent, sure, but they got invited to the table, and maybe they do have big opinions about the Pass of Edoras, and they've just been invited to talk about it. So that's cool. And so I'm going to zoom out one more time.
Do it.
So how to find engagement, be engaged in the party. A very simple choice that people will make early on in character decisions that will often kneecap them down the line is they will create characters who don't need to be in a party. If you create a cool loner ranger with his dog who's rad, that's awesome. But if your relationship to the party is, I could take or leave it,
That's I Am Legend, and there's a reason why Will Smith is the only person in the movie.
unless Will Smith gets a pass, he can pull that off. We'd all just be happy to play with it.
Zombie
you know what?
apocalypse, give him a break.
But you can be a loner, but you just need the party, whether that's you're someone whose parents were killed, because you're an edgy rogue and you still need a family. Or maybe you're just like, I want to be a hero and I need other heroes to empower me. Whatever your reason is, that makes those, hey, do you want to come to the blacksmith, more impactful, because it's not just throwing a bone, it's genuinely, my character needs this party and my character wants to understand better, because D&D is fundamentally a group
social game.
It's a contact sport, and there are different RPGs that are more focused on solo play, and I love them. But if you're playing D&D, you're playing in a party. It's just a decision. And if you've made an edgy rogue who always hangs out on their own, you can just pivot. Because no one actually knows what's going on inside the head and heart of your character. And people change all the time. When we talk about moments of growth, you could have been playing with this party for 8 months and just been like, yeah, I don't know, I'm cool. I kill fucking shit when like there's ogres around, but like I don't talk. And then suddenly, that rogue takes off their dark, spooky hood, and it was like, I would like an ale.
That's
and like,
character growth.
And then they share a drink with everybody. Yeah, exactly.
And one thing I think to...
Mike.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. And one other thing that, like, we're talking a lot about these kind of like upper level, emotional, very high, kind of like high, what's the word I'm looking for? Top down views of how to change your game. Something I know, actually show of hands, who's playing in person right now? You lucky dogs.
Wow.
I'm jealous. Who's
Who's
playing online right now? Yeah, a big majority. So are we. We started playing in person, and God, I miss it so much. We are in the process of trying to get to studio space together, but we're streaming at the moment. So being online serves our purpose for now. But a really important thing, and I think this is something that we as a table have gotten better at, is staying engaged. When you're online, you see eyes all the time. Like, your eyes have to be forward, because if you see someone kind of like looking down in a way, or very clearly like watching videos or doing something else, that breaks your immersion and breaks your safety. You don't feel like you can be emotional if people aren't present. And this in when you're playing in person, this would be like being on your phone all the time during session, having side conversations when, say, your paladin and your rogue are having this really big heart-to-heart moment. Someone's confessing love for someone else, and then we've got the two other people over here in the corner laughing over a meme. It can really disrupt the table. So do yourself and your DMs a favor by trying to stay engaged as much as you can. Everyone has different capacities for that. So whether you're like doodling in your book but actively listening, or just watching, try and stay engaged as much as you can, especially when you're not in the scene.
So I'm a person with like good ADHD, and like sitting and watching something that I'm not actively involved in, as narcissistic as it seems, is hard for me. So what I've taken to doing, and like it's honestly just keeping my hands busy kind of helps. And so I have a little camera tripod with a little spinny top. I could just get a fidget spinner, but my camera thing is way better. I just spin the top over and over again. And just like little things that, as long as you're not
disrupting.
Yeah, as long as you're not disrupting and also like fully disengaged. Because I'm still listening, I'm still present, but I am doing something to just like keep that part of my brain from going insane.
Because if we were to be like, hey, Finnan, Adam would be like, yeah, absolutely, I'm right here.
And so when we talk about checking in and using these tools, if your way of engaging isn't the same, I am the type of person who can just stare at the thing for 4 hours. I love it. I'm like, give me those eyeballs. But if your way of engaging isn't my way of engaging, it's okay to have conversations outside of the table. Be like, hey, Sean, I'm gonna do my fidget spinner thing, and I'm still listening. And
talk to your friends, solve your problems.
Yes.
Talk to your friends, solve your problems.
And this is what I would say, the importance of managing group dynamics. This is also me, capital T therapist, coming in here. I like to think that I have a pretty unique eye for how our table works. I have the ability to step outside and kind of like really put my what if this was a group therapy session? how has this worked? Because sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is.
D&D is therapeutic. It's not therapy unless it is, but it's therapeutic. So when you look at how a group is running, it's often important to pause what the group is doing or have meetings outside of when you're actually playing together to be like, hey, can we elevate our gameplay? Can we make things better? Can we do things differently? What do we want this table to be like? I would encourage you, talk to your table mates. Talk to them, hang out, do things that aren't D&D together.
And I will say a simple tool that we use is check-ins.
Yep.
We use a break when we're streaming online. We do for about 2.5 hours. We do a 10-minute break, and then we, do another 2 hours or so when we sign off. Halfway through, we're just like, hey, how's everybody doing? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs middle. If everyone thumbs up, cool. But if someone does a thumbs middle, it's like, do we want to talk about this? And sometimes the answer is no. Okay, that's respecting space. And sometimes it's just like, hey, that thing that happened with the werewolf, it's just stirring up some stuff, and I'm experiencing that bleed. And it's like, is there anything you need right now? It's like, no, I just might be a little quieter later. And then if it is a thumbs down, you're like, we'll talk about that. And if that means that our break has to go longer than 8 minutes,
so be it.
What's most important is us as friends and us as the party.
The table comes first.
And so if you are, playing as a thing, just at the end of the session, be like, hey, how's everybody doing? And give space for people to check in. Because if you check in earlier, like when the hurt happened, then it's gives it an opportunity to get expressed rather than letting that shit fester and get ugly.
And if you
that's
don't
when
talk
people
about
get
it, it
hurt.
just gets worse.
But speaking of letting things fester and gets worse, my man Adam.
The weirdest segue, but okay.
Infection killed more people than stab wounds historically. Like, getting stabbed was not the problem. Getting stabbed and getting a piece of your shirt in your body was the problem.
You're right. You're absolutely
Adam's
right.
going to
It's
talk
called
about
history.
Adam's going to talk about how to bring narrative through combat, if that wasn't blatantly clear through Sean's transition.
Yeah, hi, it's me. So I want to talk about describing your combat, and I find a lot of people, the roadblock to that is that they're like, oh, I can't think of anything on the fly, like a cool thing that I can describe. Don't. Plan ahead. If you're a warlock, you're using Eldritch Blast. Let's not kid ourselves. If you're a fighter, you're gonna hit someone, you're gonna hit them good. And just before you come to the table, be like, how did my fighter hit good? How did that work? What does that look like? Because think of it like a movie. Would you rather watch dope choreography, or would you watch two people just hit each other over and over again, kind of like those pecking, drinking bird things? That's not fun. And so I think martial classes are harder because spellcasters have a little cheat code in that you have your spell description for one, but also you have your material components, and that's a really easy way to elevate rather than being like, I cast Silent Image, and that's it, and the thing is there. It's like you pull out a piece of sheep's wool, I'm pretty sure is the material component, and you do something dope with it, and then an image appears, and it just elevates it a tiny bit. You don't have to monologue.
I will also counter that they're one of the best examples of a player using flavor and description to describe a martial class is Liam O'Brien right now playing Orm in Campaign 3 of Critical Role. He talks about Orm as if he's a dancer. It is, oh my god, it's beautiful to listen to his character descriptions about how Orm hits something with a sword.
I think importantly, if you want a masterclass in combat character description, Liam O'Brien is the place to go, because Caleb Widogast, a great example, he pulls his tar out and he does the big spell. Spellcasters kind of get a little bit of an easier route because you have kind of things pre-built for you. For martial classes, you don't have to spend 20 minutes being like, I spin my sword over my head and then behind my back, and then I'm going to describe this lengthy thing. But rather than saying, I rolled a hit, I hit, damage, be like, I flourish my sword to the side and then stab low. And it's just that little bit of extra flavor that elevates your character and makes them a real thing, a third dimension to them, rather than them just like kind of up and down.
And you can also build, sorry, you can also build off of what the person before you did in combat. So say Adam is playing a fighter and his fighter stabs under the ribs. I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, so Neppy, seeing that Finnan has opened up a wound under the ribs, I'm gonna reach out my hand and I'm gonna cast, or I'm gonna touch right there and I'm gonna cast Inflict Wounds to try and make the wound worse.
Yeah.
So you can build off of each other, and really like that also bonds you together, because then Neppy and Finnan share like a visual high, like a we high five as I hurt this person very badly. So you can play off of each other. It's really fun to do that.
Also,
please.
Yeah.
And genuinely though, it is sometimes hard to think of like how things work. I'm not a sword fighter. I don't know how to coolly describe there you go. You know? But what you do know is what your character's going through.
Yeah.
So you can be like, I see this big ogre, and Grimble wants to protect his friends. So Grimble's gonna get in there and hit him with his sword. And so that was not a flowery character description, but it's like Grimble is, you can talk about what's going through their head and why they're doing the thing.
Put motivation behind action.
Yeah.
Also, narrate failures. Like, if you are like, I rolled a hit, I missed, dang, move on. Like, again, you can do that and it's fine. But like, if you want to elevate your roleplay, which I'm assuming you do because you're sitting in these chairs, like, narrate your failures. Some of the best moments, I remember our wonderful DM, Tim, back when I was GMing for Tim and M, he rolled a natural 1, he had his sword that was on fire, he fell and set himself on fire, and it's so memorable. Like, to this day, I picture it in my mind, and it was amazing. He was covered in ice and fire, and he was like very upset with himself, and it was awesome, because Tim was like, oh, I fucked up bad here, I'm gonna give you something. Like, it's a gift you can give your GM, being like, here's a little thing that you can have fun with. I'm gonna trip over and like really eat shit. I think it's important to honor failures as well as success. And also, like, think about who your character is when thinking about their fighting style, or like what you want to describe in combat, because your character has an aesthetic, and it's pretty easy to just kind of tap into that and be like, this is, like, if your character's all about fire, their sword ignites. It might not do mechanically anything different. It might not do the extra 1d6.
But, okay, this is great. Not every description needs to have mechanics tied to it.
Yeah.
If you're a fighter and you just attack once, like, let's all remember that one round of combat takes place over 6 seconds, you know? So, if I get to stab someone once in 6 seconds, that might be a lot of, like, looking for, like, you know, like, it's not just, the fight isn't just walk up and stab. There's so much space for you to describe how you cross the room, you know, the table you leap over.
And your GM might make you more checks to that, to be like, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna run across the room, slide, do like a Dukes of Hazzard slide across this table, bound off the wall, and they're like, yeah, make me an acrobatics check.
Which can lead to more failures, which leads to more fun, in my opinion.
Yes.
But also, like a fun tip for fighters, like you're saying, multiple attacks in a turn. Just because it says you have 2 attacks doesn't mean your character has to swing their sword or whatever they're using twice. You stab them through the stomach, and then your second attack is turning the blade.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be like chop chop. It can be anything you want. Just think of it like a scene in a TV show and like map it out and be like, what do I want? Because you're gonna have your like mainstay staple attacks or spells that you always go back to, and you know them, and you just lean into those.
Yeah. I'm gonna come and grab your questions. I'm gonna come and grab your questions.
Emma's better at grabbing questions because I have like terrible short-term memory and do just immediately forget.
You get halfway back, and then you have to go check in again.
Where am I?
And that's a different talk, the importance of taking notes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And not talking over other players.
Yeah, hit me with it, hit me with it. I'm so ready.
Shout it at us.
In the fourth row there was talking about how you can bring a like cohesive aesthetic to your spells. They use the spell that your magic missile looks like a chicken. Maybe your character was originally a farmer who
100%.
Was digging in their cellar and found magic and is now a wizard. And they still go back to their farmer roots, so all of their spirit, like, or their spells look like chickens.
And
I love that.
If you're trying to tell me that the chicken wizard doesn't kick ass, I'll fight you. I'll fight you with my hands out in the parking lot today.
And tying this all together in terms of engaging with other players, let them affect you. If your spells can look like anything, maybe for the last 6 months they've looked like chickens, but recently you had a heart-to-heart with the like cat-themed sorcerer, and in a moment where the cat-themed sorcerer is in trouble, you cast magic missile, or chicken missile as you generally call it, and suddenly that mechanical 4d4 damage looks like cats.
Or cat scratch instead.
Yeah, and so it's like, the dice are there, but everything else but the dice is kind of up to you if your DM is cool enough.
Also, Tim.
Tim is a cool DM, can confirm.
DM.
Thank you.
Also, talking is a free action to an extent. Be reasonable. Don't, read an essay. But like, if you're like, we need to like flank to the right, do this. That took 6 seconds. You can do that. You can do that and stab someone in the mouth at the same time. People can multitask. Not me, but like other people. And then also at the end of the day, like, the battle is there to progress the story. It's always a part of the story. So like, you're not just fighting shit to fight shit, unless you are, and they're like, power to you. But if you're here, you're probably doing like pretty narrative stuff. The fight is always leading on to the next step of the narrative, and it's always kind of moving that story forward. So keep that in mind.
So we are about at our time for today. So I first and foremost want to say a huge thank you to all of you for coming out to hang out with us this afternoon. Please give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you. I also want to encourage you that if you are around tonight and of the DM persuasion, please come hang out with us 5:15 right here. Our DM Tim, as well as Sean and Adam, are going to lead y'all through a DM's workshop. We have some good juicy stuff in there. Or if you're just wanting to get into DMing, this is a really good place to start. And if you have nothing to do tonight, please come hang out with us on Twitch. We will be playing at 8:30. We usually play at 8, but we're going to try and play for 8, but if we don't get home in time, it'll be 8:30 Pacific Standard Time at twitch.tv/BlackwaterDND. We have our mainstay campaign is every Saturday. We also have stuff that happens on Wednesdays as well. We have 2 mini campaigns, which I'm GMing, and then also a really amazing show that we do called DM Roulette, where we bring 6 DMs to the table and they all DM and they all play all the characters and they rotate based on the chat's interaction, which is so fun.
It sounds insane.
It is. We have our episode tonight is episode 84. So if you want to binge something, go on YouTube. We have all of our content for spanning 4 years worth of stuff. Please go on there. We're also on socials at Blackwater D&D across all of them. Also, we have someone very special with us today. We have a team of mods that work for us, and someone who has been part of our community for a very long time, who from 3 or 4 months in, has flown here from Pennsylvania to come be with us. Teeny is like our head mod and has become very much part of the Blackwater family. We love him very, very much. And I think, Teeny, this is yours from the stream drive. Yeah?
You won it.
You won it.
That's right.
Did you throw it?
No. no, it comes apart as a dice tube should.
So our community is a really, really wonderful place. If you're looking to meet a lot of D&D like-minded folks, please come hang out with us. We would love to see you and chat with you while we play, and I hope that you learn to fall in love with the stories at your table as well. Thank you very much, you guys. Thank you.
Do we want to get them all?
If everyone wants to come up to the front, we'd love to take a photo of all of you. If not, that's totally okay. But we would love to take a photo with you. We've got some pins
Also,
as
come
well
say
if
hi.
anyone would like a pin. And come say hi. We'll be here on the side. Come say hi.
And stickers too.
Getting as comfortable as you really.
Oh yeah.